I was sitting on the back porch when my phone rang, and the number on the screen was my son-in-law's. I almost didn't answer. The last time we'd spoken, he'd told me my daughter had made her choice, and her choice didn't include me in their lives anymore. That was 14 months ago. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Mr. Whitfield. His voice was flat, not the voice of someone calling with good news. It's about Elaine. My daughter, my only child, 41 years old. I already knew before he said another word. I sat there on that porch with the phone pressed against my ear and the neighbor's sprinklers going back and forth across the fence line, that soft mechanical ticking, and I listened to him say the words I'd been afraid of since the doctor called me 11 months ago. She hadn't wanted me to know about the diagnosis. I'd found out anyway, through her old friend from college who still kept in touch with me. I tried to reach out. Elaine hadn't responded. And now my son-in-law. His name is Vincent, though I've never been able to call him anything but her husband in my mind, was telling me she was gone. A nurse'um. She'd been fine at dinner, he said. She complained of a headache, and then she wasn't fine anymore. I thanked him. I don't know why I thanked him. I hung up the phone, and I didn't move for a long time. The sprinklers kept going. I'm 67 years old. I worked 31 years as a pipefitter in a fabrication plant outside of Columbus, Ohio. I have a house I paid off 12 years ago, a 2019 pickup with 140,000 miles on it, and a small vegetable garden that gives me more zucchini than one man could ever eat. I am not a complicated person, never have been. When my wife passed, Elaine's mother, I raised our daughter on my own from the time Elaine was 15. We were close for a long time. We were the kind of close that you don't talk about because it doesn't need to be said. Then she met Vincent. I want to be fair. I tried to be fair for years. Vincent Ashworth came from money, real money, the kind that comes with its own vocabulary and its own set of rules that nobody writes down but everybody's expected to know. His family owned a regional chain of medical imaging centers across the Midwest. When Vincent and Elaine married, she stepped into a world that was very different from the one she'd grown up in. I thought that was fine. I wanted her to have a good life. What I didn't expect was how quickly she started to disappear into it. It happened gradually. Holidays got complicated. Visits got shorter. There was always something. Vincent's family had plans, or the timing wasn't right, or the drive was too long. Elaine would call, and then she'd call less often, and then she'd text instead of call, and then the texts got shorter. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself that's just what happens when your kid gets older and builds their own life. But I noticed things. The way Vincent spoke to me when we were in the same room, not rude exactly, but with a patience that bordered on condescension, the kind of tone you use with someone you consider a project. The way Elaine would defer to him on every decision, then look at me afterward with an expression I couldn't quite read. The Christmas when I gave her the quilt her mother had started before she got sick, the one I'd had finished by a woman in our church who had known her mother, and Elaine had smiled and hugged me, and then I saw Vincent take it out of her hands and set it aside and say something close to her ear, and she didn't pick it back up. I never saw that quilt again. 3 years before she died, something happened. I still don't know the full story. Elaine called me one evening, and she was upset, and she said something about a business deal that had gone wrong, and that Vincent felt I had said something to someone that I shouldn't have. I hadn't said anything to anyone. I told her that. She said she believed me, but that Vincent needed some time. Some time turned into no contact. No contact turned into the phone call where he told me her choice was made. I spent 14 months assuming that was how things would stay. That I would eventually get a call saying Elaine was ready to talk, and we would work through it slowly, and things would be awkward for a while, and then maybe they'd get better. Instead, I got the call on a Thursday evening with the sprinklers going and the sky turning that particular shade of orange that Ohio gets in late September. The funeral was held the following Saturday at a church in Dublin, Ohio, the suburb where Vincent and Elaine had lived for the last 6 years. I drove 2.5 hours to get there. I wore the suit I'd bought for my wife's funeral, which still fit well enough. I sat near the back because I didn't know where else to sit, and I looked at the photo of my daughter on the easel near the altar, a professional photo from some event, her hair done, wearing a dress I'd never seen, and I tried to hold myself together. Vincent didn't acknowledge me during the service. I told myself that was grief. People handle things differently. Afterward, in the reception area at the back of the church, he found me. He was put together in the way men with money are put together. Dark suit, no wrinkle, hair in order despite everything. He looked tired but composed. He shook my hand the way you shake the hand of someone you've seen at a work function once or twice. Not cold enough to cause a scene, just enough to communicate something. "We appreciate you coming," he said. We, like he was speaking on behalf of a committee. I said I wouldn't have missed it. I said she was my daughter. He nodded, and then he said it. Low voice, not loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I want to be straightforward with you. Elaine had assets. The house, the accounts, everything she accumulated during our marriage. I think we both know what direction those things go, so I'd rather save us both the awkwardness. You shouldn't expect any of that to come your way." I looked at him for a moment. I said, "Okay." He seemed a little surprised. I didn't push back. He nodded again and moved off to talk to someone else, and I stood there by the coffee table holding a small plate of food I hadn't eaten, and I thought about the quilt. I drove home that night thinking about a lot of things. Here is what Vincent didn't know, what almost nobody knew except for my daughter, her attorney, and me. 6 years earlier, 3 years before the estrangement, before the business dispute, before all of it, Elaine had called me on a Sunday afternoon and asked if she could come visit. Just her, she said. She arrived with a bag of groceries and made soup on my stove the way her mother used to. And after dinner, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and she slid an envelope toward me. Inside was a letter, handwritten, 4 pages. I'm not going to put all of it here because some of it is private in a way that should stay private. But she told me things I didn't know she knew, that she had watched me work double shifts to keep her in school clothes and never complain, that she remembered the year the furnace broke and I slept on the couch in a winter coat for 3 weeks so she could have the space heater in her bedroom, that she knew I'd cashed out a small retirement account to help her with the down payment on her first apartment without telling her what it really cost me. She said she was afraid that if she didn't write it down, something would happen and she'd run out of time to say it. At the bottom of the letter, she said there was something else in the envelope. It was a business card, an attorney in Westerville. She'd already met with him. I want to make sure you're protected, she told me, whatever happens. I told her she was being dramatic. She was 35 years old and healthy. She said maybe so. But she'd thought about it, and it was important to her, and she wanted me to trust her on this. I called the attorney the next week, a man named Mr. Callahan. He explained what Elaine had set in motion, a separate testamentary document structured in a specific way, covering a portion of her independent assets. Assets that had come to her before the marriage from a settlement she'd received, money she'd invested quietly on her own over the years. She had not commingled these with marital assets. That was intentional. Mr. Callahan walked me through what this meant in plain terms. I'm a pipe fitter from Columbus. He was patient with me. I signed what needed to be signed. I went home, and I did not think much about it for the next 6 years because my daughter was alive and we still had time, and I was not in the habit of thinking about anyone dying. Then she died. And Vincent stood in the back of that church and told me not to expect anything. Mr. Callahan called me the Monday after the funeral. He told me he'd filed the relevant documents and that there would be a formal reading of the estate at his office the following Thursday. He asked if I planned to attend. I told him I didn't know I was supposed to. He said there were matters pertaining to me directly, and yes, he thought I should be there. The drive to Westerville on Thursday morning was strange. I kept the radio off. I thought about the last real conversation I'd had with Elaine years back, before everything fell apart, and how she'd stood in my kitchen doorway with her coat on, about to leave, and she'd looked at me and said, "I love you, Dad. I need you to know that." I'd told her I knew. I hadn't known how much she meant it. Vincent was already in the conference room when I arrived. He was with an attorney of his own, a woman in a sharp blazer who had the look of someone very good at her job and very aware of it. Vincent looked at me across the table the way you look at someone who has shown up where you didn't expect them. He said, "I wasn't told you'd be here." I said Mr. Callahan had asked me to come. Vincent's attorney put her hand on his arm briefly. A small gesture. A hold-on gesture. Mr. Callahan came in and introduced himself to everyone, and then he sat down and opened the folder in front of him and explained that he was the executor of a specific testamentary trust established by Elaine 6 years prior to and independent of the marital estate, and that this proceeding pertained to the disposition of those assets. He walked through the legal language carefully. What it came down to was this. My daughter had a brokerage account she'd opened before her marriage, funded initially from the personal injury settlement she'd received in her late 20s after a car accident. Over the years, she'd added to it quietly, rolling in bonuses from her work as a healthcare consultant, reinvesting dividends. She had never transferred these funds into any joint account. Under Ohio law and the terms of the trust she'd established, these assets had passed entirely outside the marital estate. The total value was approximately $460,000. She had left it all to me. Vincent's attorney started talking immediately. I watched him across the table, watched his face go through several things very quickly, the way a person's face does when something they assume to be true turns out not to be. He told me not to expect a penny. He believed it. He had known about the Sunday afternoon visit 6 years ago. The letter, the envelope, the card with Mr. Callahan's name on it. There was a contesting process. His attorney was thorough and skilled, and she raised every argument she could raise. That my daughter had lacked capacity, that there was undue influence, that the trust document had procedural irregularities. Mr. Callahan had anticipated all of it. The trust had been drafted carefully. 2 independent witnesses, a notarized certificate of mental competency from Elaine's physician at the time of signing, a video recording of my daughter sitting in this same conference room 6 years ago, speaking clearly and calmly about her intentions. Mr. Callahan played the video during a subsequent hearing. I watched my daughter on a laptop screen in a conference room in Westerville, Ohio, and she was 35 years old again, healthy, her hair down, wearing the blue sweater she always wore in autumn. She looked directly into the camera, and she said her name and the date, and she explained in her own words why she was establishing the trust and what she wanted to happen to it and why. She said, "My father gave me everything he had. I want to give back what I can." I had to look at the ceiling for a minute. The contest was denied. The trust stood as written. I drove home on a Tuesday afternoon in April, and I stopped at a diner outside of Columbus where I used to take Elaine for pancakes when she was small. The same place, or close enough, same red booths, same laminated menus, same coffee in the thick white mugs. I ordered breakfast even though it was 2 in the afternoon because that was the thing to do. I have not spent any of the money yet. Some people have asked me what I plan to do with it, and I tell them I'm still figuring that out. I think I will set aside a portion for the church her mother attended, because her mother would have wanted that. I've thought about funding a scholarship at the community college in the name of someone I loved, something small but lasting. I've thought about fixing up the house, finally replacing the windows that have needed replacing for 10 years. But mostly what I've been thinking about is this. My daughter sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and wrote me a letter and made sure I would be okay. She did this 3 years before she stopped returning my calls, before whatever happened with Vincent happened, before the estrangement that I still don't fully understand. She loved me through the distance. She loved me quietly, the way I had loved her, without making a production of it, without needing anyone else to see it. That is the thing that money can't approximate. $460,000 is a number. What my daughter did is not a number. It's something I carry around with me in the same pocket where I keep the letter she wrote. The original, folded and refolded until the creases have gone soft, the ink still clear. Vincent moved out of the Dublin house within a few months. I don't know where he went. I don't think about him very much. I still have more zucchini than I know what to do with. The neighbor's sprinklers still go back and forth in the evenings. The pickup has 143,000 miles on it now, and it runs fine. Some people get to be loved in ways they don't find out about until later. I was one of those people. I don't take that lightly, not for a single day. I keep the letter in my shirt pocket most days, not because I need to read it. I've read it enough times that I could recite it, but because there's something about knowing it's there. My daughter wrote it when she was 35 years old and healthy, and had no reason to think she wouldn't have another 40 years to say things out loud. She said them anyway. That's the part I come back to. There's a kind of person who does the right thing when it costs them something. Not when it's convenient, not when someone's watching, but quietly on a Sunday afternoon when nobody would ever know the difference. Elaine was that kind of person. She drove 2 hours to sit on my kitchen table and make soup and hand me an envelope, and she didn't make a production of it. She just did it. And then she put her coat on and went home. That's character. Not the kind you declare. The kind you demonstrate when the moment is small and private and there's no applause. Vincent stood in the back of that church and told me not to expect anything. He believed he was right. What he didn't understand was that my daughter had already thought further ahead than he had. She thought carefully, not just about what she wanted to happen, but about how to make sure it actually would. She found the right attorney. She structured things correctly under Ohio law. She sat in a conference room and recorded herself on video, so that 6 years later, when a room full of people needed to understand her intentions, there would be no guessing. That kind of foresight isn't luck. It's a person using their mind deliberately, doing the hard work of thinking something through to its conclusion, instead of leaving it to chance. I didn't do any of that. I just showed up and told the truth when someone asked me a question. But my daughter did the thinking for both of us years before either of us knew it would matter. I've had people ask me if I'm angry about the estrangement, about the years I didn't get back, and the honest answer is that I stayed with it long enough to understand something. The distance between us in those last years was real, but it wasn't the whole story. Elaine loved me through it. She maintained that love in a practical, legal, documented way while we weren't speaking. That took something, a willingness to hold on to what was true even when circumstances made it complicated. I've had to find that same willingness, to hold on to who she was without letting the hard years crowd out the real ones. That's not easy. Some mornings it still isn't, but it's the work, and I do it. What I know is this. The people who live with integrity, who tell the truth, who protect the ones they love even when it's inconvenient, who think carefully and act with intention, those people leave something behind that outlasts whatever noise surrounded them. Vincent is somewhere I don't know. The trust has been settled. The court is done. What remains is a letter in my pocket and a memory of my daughter in a blue sweater saying her name into a camera with a steadiness that still takes my breath away. She gave me everything she had. The least I can do is be worth that.